My name is Harshil, and today we are going to explore a critical ethical dilemma in modern computing, like how automated systems designed to protect us can inadvertently harm us. And specifically, we'll dissect a case study, malicious input to content filter from ACM Code of Ethics. So, this case study isn't just about faulty algorithms, okay, to be honest, and it's all about the how bias, negligence, and malicious content can turn technology into a tool of operation. And by the end of this talk, you all will understand like why the ethical frameworks, like the ACM code, are not optionals. They are the bedrock of our trustworthy technologies. Okay, so moving forward. The ACM Code of Ethics serves as a moral compass for computing professionals, like urging us to prioritize the public good. And I would say it's not just a set of rules; it's a call to action, I would say, and it actually reminds us that every line of code we write and every system we design has the potential to impact lives. Okay, so here in this case study, we'll explore how Blocker Plus, a fictional but realistic content filtering tool, violated the principles. Like it suppressed free speech and systematically discriminate everything. So we'll examine all of these, and there are two technological topics. The first one is biometric, and the second is encryption through ethical, legal, societal, and moral lenses. And eventually, by the end of the talk, you will understand why ethical frameworks are not optional but foundation to responsible innovations. Okay, so here's the case study breakdown. So let's picture a thing. Okay, a company called Blocker Plus creates a content filtering tool to comply with the U.S. Children's Internet Protection Act CIPA. So what's their mission? Uh, to block websites deemed harmful to minors in schools and librarians. That actually sounds noble, right? But here's where things go wrong. Actually, to automate these things, these processes, Blocker Plus actually uses machine learning algorithm. The system relies on feedback from the users, teachers, like librarians, parents, to learn what content to block. Okay, but actually, the activist groups soon discovered a loophole into it. Like by flooding the systems with the fake feedbacks, they corrupted the machine learning models, and suddenly, legitimate content like resources on LGBTQ plus rights, climate's climate science, climate changes, and vaccination information was labeled as inappropriate, and eventually it was blocked. Okay, so here imagine a student researching a gender identity for a project. Okay, for an example. So I would say only to find every resource blocked, or a teacher trying to share a factual climate data only to be silenced by an algorithm. So basically, this isn't a hypothetical theory. It's a systematic failure with a real world consequences. So Blocker Plus tool designed to protect become a weapon of censorship. Okay, and that's all for the reason. Okay, wait. So here we'll break it down with the whole structure of a Blocker Plus. Uh, so what actually Blocker Plus does and everything about that. So Blocker Plus is content filtering to a system which is designed to comply with the US Children's Internet Protocol Act. Okay, and a law requiring schools and libraries to block access to material deemed harmful to minors. So this tool uses machine learning to classify content, relying on users' feedback, as I already told you, teachers, librarians, and parents' feedback to refine its model. And however, activist group exploited this feedback loop. I mean, they are flooding the system with malicious reports and some fake reports to corrupt its classification process. So, what would be the result? Okay. Eventually, what happened is the legitimate content, such as resources on LGBTQ rights and climate change and vaccination, was systematically blocked from everywhere. So, for instance, uh, a search for LGBTQ plus mental health support might return no results at all. And while a search for a heterosexual relation would remain untouched at that moment. So this wasn't an accident; it was a direct consequence of Blocker Plus failure to anticipate inputs and audits its system for this. So that was all. Moving forward, let's talk about the technical flaws. So Blocker Plus ML model suffered from three critical flaws. Okay, so lack of input, then biased training data, and adversarial testings. Okay, so lack of input validation was is like the feedback mechanism had no safeguard against fake or malicious reports. Bias in training data. So the system was trained on historical data and reflecting societal prejudice, like for an example, labeling LGBTQ plus content as inappropriate and some of the data as inappropriate at that moment. And the third is that, and in the third case, the developers did not simulate attacks during the development of identify the vulnerabilities into that. So that was the flaw. And let's talk about the real world parallels. Okay, for example, so these flaws mirror real world failures. For example, like in 2018, I think Amazon scrapped an AI recruiting tool that discriminated against women's because it was trained on resumes submitted over a decade. I mean, predominantly from men. Okay, so similarly, uh, back in 2021, I think Twitter's image cropping algorithm was found to prioritize white faces over black faces. So that was also the case. And Blocker Plus repeated these mistakes. I mean, provoking that biased input lead to a biased output. That's um, so moving forward to ethical ACM code. Like here we'll discuss about the principles. The first one is avoid harm. Principle 1.2, avoid harm, and we'll discuss about it. So the ACM code here mandates that computing professionals avoiding harm. Okay, so Blocker Plus violated these principles mentioned over here in multiple ways. The first we can say psychological harm. Okay, so blocking LGBTQ plus resources like isolated vulnerable students. A 2020 GLSEN study found that LGBTQ plus youth in a school I mean, uh, with over filter are 40% more likely to attempt suicide at that moment. This isn't just statistics. I mean, it's a human tragedy, you know. And for an example, imagine a transgender student named Alex, okay, who relies on online forums to connect with supportive communities. And when Blocker Plus blocks these resources, Alex, feels erased and isolated. This, this psychological harm is direct violation of the principle 1.2, right? The second is societal harm, which is, suppressing climate science content. For example, let's say, uh, so These content undermines public understanding of the critical issues. When during Australia's 2020 bushfire, Facebook's algorithm, when we can say, unnecessarily flagged wildfire updates as a false news and denying emergency responses. And similarly, Blocker Plus overblocking of climate-related content could hinder efforts to address global warming, a crisis that affects us all, every single person. The third one is economic harm. Okay, so overblocking can also harm businesses. So, for example, in 2018, YouTube's content ID system mistakenly flagged and demonetized video from the small creators at that moment, and which costing them thousands of dollars in revenue. So basically, Blocker Plus actions could similarly harm educational publishers and we can say content creators who rely on schools and libraries for revenue. The next is Principle 1.4, fairness and non-discrimination. Uh, so the first one is systematic bias. Okay, the content labels. Sorry. So as we know, first this is systematic bias. So LGBTQ content was disappropriately flagged as an inappropriate, right? And reflecting societal, I mean, heteronomically. And these themes like this mirrors Facebook's 2021 scandal. I mean, there was one of the biggest scandals of all time, where I mean, it's AI labeled a post with like words with a lesbian as a sexual solitations, and such I mean, systemic bias silences, I mean, marginalized voices and I mean, inequality into them, right? The second is reinforced of stereotype. So the system's bias wasn't accidental, we can say. It was a baked into our training data. For an example, like Amazon's AI recruiting tool, I mean, discriminated against women's because it was trained on resumes submitted over decades, and predominantly from men, we can say. So Blocker Plus repeated these mistakes and providing that bias inputs lead to a bias output. The third is undetermined education. So what's the impact on the education? We can say so. Overblocking undermines the education mission of schools and librarians. For example, a teacher trying to share factual climate data might find their resources blocked and leaving student misinformed. So these, I mean, these things like this violated the ACM call to, I mean, foster the participation of all the people. Yeah, so that's all for this. Moving to next, uh, comprehensive risk analysis, principle 2.5. So the first one is no red teaming and untested for malicious input. So it directly says that the failure to anticipate the attacks. Okay, so ethical machine learning design requires red teaming, that's for sure, and simulating attacks to test robustness. And so for an example, let's take an example of Google's Project Zero team. I mean, Google's Project Zero team routinely hacks into own systems to find vulnerabilities. And Blocker Plus negligence, I mean, countries sharply with best practices are outlined in with the IEEE ethical aligned design guidelines. Okay, so which actually stresses proactive risk mitigations, we can say. The second is real world consequences, and we can say the lack of adversarial testing and real world consequences. In 2023 research, researchers actually demonstrate that even the state of the art models like ChatGPT 4 and SOTA models can be manipulated with the carefully crafted prompts. Okay, and Blocker Plus ignores these warnings, all of these warnings, leaving its model defenseless against all the malicious inputs. They are not trying to, I mean, secure any of these endpoints and any of these things. The third and the last one is developer must anticipate and mitigate. Okay, so it is like ethical obligation. Okay, developers have a duty to anticipate and mitigate risks. That's for sure. For example, in I'll say 2017, Microsoft's Tay chatbot was manipulated by users to produce racist and offensive content. But Blocker Plus repeated these all these mistakes. I mean, proving that ethical design requires more than technical competence. It requires foresight and you can say responsibilities. Um, so here in this slide, we'll talk about the principle 2.9, robust and unstable security. So we can say lack of input validation. Okay, the first one, no defenses against the fake feedbacks. So the feedback mechanism had no safeguards against like fake or malicious reports, as we all know. And modern machine learning algorithm systems uses, I mean, techniques like a different privacy or adversarial trainings to resist the attacks. And again, Blocker Plus ignored these models and leaving its model defenseless, which is shame on them. The second is failure to protect users. So the system's lack of a security harmed users. For example, as I remember, in back in 2021, Instagram's algorithm mistakenly censored posts by breast cancer awareness. Okay, which sparkled outrage among the survivors. I mean, everywhere. So Blocker Plus overblocking similarities harm users by silencing legitimate voices. Once again, the third is ethical design solution. So developers must prioritize security over anything. For an example, the IFT, RFC, and RFC emphasizes like treating surveillance as a systematic threat, but Blocker Plus could have adopted all the similar principles to protect its users, because everywhere in the world, I mean, if they are using machine learning, if they are using web applications, or whatever we can say, it must be it actually must come under the IEEE standards. So next topic, principle 3.7, uh, stewardship and societal systems. So Blocker Plus was integrated into schools, okay, and a space where trust is paramount, we can say. By and despite failing to uphold accuracy, I mean, it betrayed its role as a societal stepward. Uh, and here, as you can see, the first one is the public trust. So, ethical stewardship requires transparency and accountability, and as well as the, I mean, continuous improvements in the system. Like for example, let me talk about the ChatGPT. Back in 2023, ChatGPT was banned in New York City schools due to, I mean, in every schools due to fear of misinformation. Like Blocker Plus overblocking similarity undermines the public trust as well. The second is the education mission. Like I mean, schools and librarians rely on the accurate content filtering to fulfill their education missions, right? So overblocking undermines these missions by silencing legitimate voices. Say, for an example, a teacher trying to share factual climate data might find their resources blocked, and which eventually leaving the students misinformed. Okay, the third one is ethical responsibility or merge legal compliance. So we can say developers must prioritize the public good. For an example, human United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights, which eventually emphasize that companies have a responsibility to respect all the human rights, even when laws fall short. So Blogger Plus failed this test by prioritizing legal compliance or ethical responsibilities. Okay, so that was all for the principles, and now we'll talk about the stakeholder perspectives. Okay, so let's talk about that. So first of all, uh, assume all these things. Like let's start with the victims. Okay, Alex, as you can see over here. So those directly harmed, all those things directly harmed by blocker plus or blocking. Imagine a high school student named Alex. Okay, over here, who is transgender. Alex actually relies on online forums to connect with the supportive communities and we can say when Blocker Plus blocks all these resources, Alex feels erased and isolated at that moment. So this is not hypothetical. Um, I do have an example of ACLU, and back in 2022, I think the ACLU sued a school district of Missouri for blocking LGBTQ plus websites, arguing it violated the students' First Amendment right. Okay, so here Alex story exemplifies like how automated systems can inflict real lasting harm, long lasting harms. A 2020 study by the GLSEN Jason found that LGBTQ plus youth in school, like with restrictive filters, are 40% more likely to attempt suicides, as we talked earlier. So this isn't just a technical glitch; it's a moral failure, we can say. And when we design systems that silence marginalized voices, we appropriate systematic oppression. But here, Alex isn't the only victim. Consider a teacher, okay, named Maria, who tries to share a factual climate data with her student, only to find the resources blocked. Maria's students are left misinformed, we can say uh, undermining their education and their ability to address global challenges like a climate change. All these stories highlights the human cost of overblocking. It's not actually just about the algorithms. It's about the people's lives and their mental health and futures. So, as a computing professionals, we must ask who else might be harmed by our actions and how we can minimize that harm. The second is corporate perspective. So how we can start that? So now let's consider a blocker plus leadership. Okay, uh, they likely thought we are complying with law, but compliance is not equal to ethics. That we all know. So this is common a pitfall in tech. For example, in 2017, YouTube's content ID system automatically flagged and demonetized videos discussing about the LGBTQ issues, which directly complies with advertiser demands. A decision later reversed after a public outcry back in 2018, I think. So Blocker Plus leadership faced a dilemma, legal compliance with this versus we can say ethical responsibilities. So on one hand, they had to comply with CIPA, SIPA to avoid penalties. On the other hand, overblocking violated their ethical duty to, we can say, provide accurate and fair content filterings. So this tension isn't unique to Blocker Plus. In 2021, Facebook faced a backlash for prioritizing engagement over accuracy, which allowing misinformation to spread on its platform. And these cases show that corporation must be balanced legal obligations with moral duties, as outlined in the UN guiding principles on the business and human rights. So, what could Blocker Plus have done differently? Think about it. Like they could have adopted transparency reports detailing what content was blocked and why why that actually happened. They could have engaged with the stakeholders, teachers, student, and all the other groups to ensure their systems met ethical standards. I mean, and they could have also invested the bias audits to identify and address a systematic discrimination. So ultimately, I mean, Blocker Plus failure wasn't just technical, I would say. It was ethical. By prioritizing, we can say, compliance or responsibilities, they betrayed the trust of their users and public as well, we can say. Yeah. Now it's time for corporate perspective. Okay, corporate. Uh, we can say public trust in technologies is fragile. Okay. As I remember in 2023, few security study found that 20 no 72% of Americans distrusted AI systems to make fair decisions. I mean, overblocking content fuels these distrust, I think. And for example, in 2021, Instagram's algorithm mistakenly censored the post about the breast cancers, as we all know, which actually sparkled uh, outrage in all the survivors of breast cancer. So, society value, what we can say, society values free speech, but also wants to protect children's. So overblocking undermines both of the goals. For example, blocking LGBTQ plus resources doesn't protect children; it harms them by by erasing their identities and isolating them from supportive communities. So this tension reflects a broader societal challenge, like how do we balance the competitive values and on the other hand, we want to protect vulnerable groups from the harmful content, and we also want to ensure like access to legitimate information and uphold free speech, right? So as a computing professionals, we must navigate these all these challenges with the cat, like tools by IBM's AI Fairness 360 allows audits to detect bias. Blocker Plus actually ignored such solutions, to be honest. So, by failing to prioritize transparency and accountability, Blocker Plus eroded public trust and undermined its mission to protect the children's. Honestly, the last one is law enforcement perspective. Okay, so Algorithmic Accountability Act. We'll talk about this. So consider let's consider the legal perspective over here. So, okay, so courts are increasingly scrutinizing algorithmic biasness in Epic versus DHS. Okay, back in 2022, a federal court ruled that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security facial recognition system violated privacy laws. But at that moment, similarly, Blocker Plus could face what we can say legislation under the Algorithmic Accountability Act back in 2023, which mandates bias audits for high risk AI systems. So a judge would evaluate whether Blocker Plus action comply with the laws like SIPA while respecting the constitution's rights like free speech. And here, for example, back in 1997, the Reno and ACLU, the incident, as I remember, the Supreme Court actually ruled that overly broad content filtering violate the First Amendment. So blocker plus overblocking could be seen in similar violations, especially if it's disappropriately targeted groups. But in the other hand, legal frameworks are catching up. Okay, so proposed laws like Algorithmic Accountability Act, which is released in 2023, which aim to hold companies accountable for biased algorithms. So all these laws require transparency, accountability, and fairness, which eventually values that Blocker Plus ignored everything at a single moment. So what we can do as computing professionals. So we must proactively address these issues, ensuring our system align with both legal and ethical standards. And waiting for legislation isn't enough. We must lead the way in building ethical technology. Moving forward to fifth topic of ours, tech topics, biometric and encryption. Here we'll talk about both of the technological topics, biometric and encryption. So let me introduce you with that. So now we have actually explored all the automated systems like content filters can be weaponized against the marginalized group. So let's shift our focus to two critical technologies like which actually shapes our digital future, biometric and the encryption. So both are powerful tools with immense potential, like for good, and yet their misuse or misregulation can pose a grave risk to privacy, equality, and even the democracy. So let's talk about this first, biometric. So definition and the current use of the biometric. Okay, so biometric actually involves using unique human characteristics such as fingerprinting, facial features, iris patterns, and voice patterns as well for identification or authentication. And they are widely used in smartphones for unlocking screens, in airports for expedite check-ins, and law enforcement agencies for suspect identifications. So, in many ways, biometric promises greater convenience and security after all. And you cannot lose your fingerprints the way you might lose a password. Okay, so our main key point is biometric are inherently personal. Losing your password, and we can say losing password is what we can say inconvenient. Losing your biometric data is irreversible. So that's our main point. So what's the legal landscape of this? Oh, okay, legal password, legal ethics. So globally, laws struggle to keep pace with rapid biometric adoptions. I mean, the European Union, data, their GDPR, the European Union General Data Protection Regulation, treats biometric data as a sensitive data. Which requires explicit user consent. Meanwhile, in the US regulation is patchwork, you can say. So, the Biometric Information Privacy Act (BIPA), Illinois mandates informed consent and allows private lawsuits for violations. And other states like Texas and Washington have weaker biometric statuses. Like many states have no specific biometric privacy laws at all. For example, as I remember the case study, uh, Rosenberg versus Six Flags back in 2019, the Illinois Supreme Court ruled that failing to get a proper consent before collecting a child fingerprint was a violation of a BIPA. So this decision actually underscope how even well-intentioned users like a theme park. Okay, theme park pass system can run afoul of a law, we can say. So move to ethical consideration. Um, the rapid implementation of biometric can raises ethical questions. Okay, so a case study, as I remembered, in 2018, gender shade study found that some commercial facial recognition system had error rates up to 34.7%, as we can see here. 34.7% for dark skinned women versus 0.8 for light skinned men. So this disparity isn't a mere bug. It actually exposes structural biases in the data. So these systems are trained on often predominantly, images, pre-taken images of lighter skinned individuals. So when a misidentified face can lead to a false arrest or a social stigma, the consequences, all the consequences is like it becomes dire. So the insights are like, if these systems are widely deployed in the policies, or you can say border control, the marginalized communities bear the brunt of false positives. Okay. Moving to the next. So the societal concerns and the moral concerns. Okay, so beyond individual harms, biometric can encourage mass surveillance. For instance, in China, it's like a facial recognition is used to track minorities, like Uyghur minorities. I cannot pronounce that simply, but this effective curtailings, okay, their freedom of the movement and the association. Back in 2022, I think, in the United States, some policies department employ real-time facial recognition to monitor protests. I mean, which actually raises the First Amendment concern about chilling free speech. And as I said, and back in 2022, uh, a MIT study found that 81% of Americans oppose the government facial recognition at public gatherings. I mean, fearing undue surveillance, right? So once normalized, it's hard to roll back all these practices. Okay, so parallel to content filters, here we'll talk about this. So just like how content filters can systematically block informations, facial recognition can systematically track individuals, especially those who doesn't. Okay, my bad. So that's all. And let me talk about the moral dimensions and philosophical viewpoint. Okay, as you can see over here, Hallen's case study. So philosopher Hallen in privacy, in context of argue that technologies must respect contextual integrity. The idea that that should be collected, used, and shared in ways aligned with socially agreed norms. Like biometrics often violated these principles by capturing and storing deeply personal data without transparent disclosures or meaningful consents. So our key moral questions is it ethical to deploy systems that disappropriately harm certain ethical or gender group? No? Should the citizens have the right to opt out if biometric scans become default in the public spaces? And the third is, how do we ensure don't slip into an era of we can say pervasive Big Brother style monitoring everything, right? So that these are the three questions, and we can say uh, we got on the conclusion like for biometrics, biometric technologies can enhance security, but without robust legal frameworks and ethical consideration and societal guidelines and guardians, it actually risks turning out most personal features into a liability, particularly for already vulnerable populations. Okay, so these things are massively, I mean, we can say damaging thing. So the next part is encryption fundamentals. So let me talk about the encryption, the fundamental of encryption. Okay, so encryption is the bedrock of a secure communication in our digital era. So whether you are sending a private text on WhatsApp or making online purchases, so cryptographic protocols ensure that only the intended recipient can read your data. Okay, at its core, mm, encryption embodies the principle of privacy by design, trembling data, so it's unreadable without the correct key. Okay, so our key distinction comes like encryption is not about hiding criminals. We can say hiding criminal activities, but it actually, I mean, ensures every day's digital confidentiality from medical records to, I mean, personal chats, everything. I mean, that's how it is important to us. Moving to next, legal battles. Yep. So, however, encryption frequently collides with national security and laws, okay, and enforcement interests. So, consider here we're considering just two major examples: Apple versus FBI and Earn and Earn IT Act, 2023. Sorry. So, Apple versus FBI back in 2016, the FBI requested Apple to create a backdoor to unlock an iPhone used by a suspect in a terrorism case. Okay, but eventually Apple refused and arguing it would weaken security for all the iPhones if it discloses to every single person out there. Okay, the next is Earn It Act, as we talked earlier. So this U.S. legislation threatened end-to-end encryption by making the platforms liable if if they enable illegal content. So critics worry and it may pressure the companies to adopt backdoors or compromised encryptions. And so we can just say the international context. Okay, let me talk about that. So Australia's 2018 law, I mean, compels tech companies to provide law enforcement with, we can say, with the decryption data labeled by cybersecurity experts as dangerously naive because any built-in backdoor can be exploited by by the bad actors, by the black hat hackers. Okay, moving to the next, encryption, ethical and societal implications. So on the other hand, encryption protects vulnerable groups like activists in Iran rely on a single to organized protests with a minimum fear of we can say reprisal. And protesters in Hong Kong turn to Telegram for secure coordination against the protection against government surveillances. As I remember, Bruce Steiner argues in a Data and Colleagues, okay, encryption is akin to a human right in the digital era. Like on the other hand, the law enforcement uh, argues that strong encryption can shelter criminals, making it harder to gather evidence of a serious crimes like a terrorism or a child exploitation. Okay, so that was all for the ethics in encryption. So let me talk about the societal implications. like balancing privacy and securities. So as you can see over here, a report of a thread like FBI 2823 60%. Okay, so a 2023 FBI report suggests that approximately 60% of criminal investigations involving encrypted devices or a communication stall out due to an inability to access the data. Okay, so this figure is often cited by official pushing for exceptional access to encrypted data, and yet the cryptography experts warn that any exceptional access for governments potential become a potential exceptional vulnerability for hackers. But- So we face a zero sum over here. Like more privacy can hamper certain enforcement efforts, like less privacy can undermine the civil liabilities and actually endanger the user data if those backdoors leak or we can say are misused. And the potential middle ground, and like some purpose key escrows like systems or carefully regulated warrants, but these solutions remains hotly debated in the crypto community. Okay, to next, moral obligations. Okay, one of the most interesting things. Ultimately, developers and tech companies have moral duties to protect users' data from unauthorized access. Like no one It ensures that no one can unauthorizedly access the particular person's data. But when Facebook modifies WhatsApp's encryption in 2021, as I remember, to share metadata with advertisers, I mean critics called it a betray of user trust. Okay, and according to the IEFT's RFC's 7258 rule back in 2014, the pervasive monitoring is an attack. Okay, in a simple terms, we can say that building systems that are trivially survived in tantamount attacking a user's privacy uh, for industry that handles billions of personal communication daily. Okay, the moral responsibility is actually immense. So here are the conclusions. The man with the call. So let's return to the Blocker Plus once again. It's a failure. Uh, we're not technical, okay, but they were ethical. The ACM code of ethics exists to prevent such harms, urging us to ask who who benefits. I mean, who is excluded? Who is unintended consequences might arise. Okay, so the lessons here apply universally, whether designing content filters, biometric systems, or we can say encryption tools. Ethical rigors is non-negotiable. Okay, so we must audit for bias, like use frameworks like IBM's AI Fairness 360. We can also prioritize transparency, public details, impact assessments. We can do that, and then we can also engage stakeholders. And we can include the marginalized voices in the design process. Okay, so all we can say is as a computing professional, we hold immense power with us. So it's with it it actually comes immense responsibility. Okay, marvels. So let's come to building a technology that uplifts and protects and empowers for every single person. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you like the video. I know it's a bit messy. Okay, I recorded 6 or 7 different shots and merged them into one. So, anyways, thank you so much. Until next time.